Hi, this is Heidi Ritaj, your host for User Friendly. Today, Hanish Patel is back to discuss the next era of connectivity. Welcome back to the User Friendly special from CES.
Hi, this is Hanish Patel, and welcome back to User Friendly, recording from CES. It's day 2 of the show, and I'm back at the Deloitte Lounge Space with 2 new guests from Deloitte. Today, we have Phil Wilson, who's been in the telecommunication space for over 30 years, and Ice Ayatolu, the marketing leader in the telecoms practice. Phil, Ice, welcome to the show.
Hi, Hanish.
Hey, Hanish.
Phil, Ice and I have known each other for years, so today's going to be a bit of a challenge to keep this thing on point, but I'll do my best. Phil, Ice, how have the first 2 days been at CES 2018?
Pretty exciting, very busy. I mean, every year this show just gets more and more people and more things happening. I mean, I've probably been coming for 20 years now, and this is the biggest one yet.
No, I agree. Everything is connected. And I mean, in CS too, right? Now it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, the casinos aren't as well connected, but everything else is well connected.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So aside from the insanity of CES, we're here today to talk about the new era in connectivity. I'm talking 5G, Wi-Fi, the Internet of Things, and what the future really holds for connected devices. Phil, Ice, we all know through our work at Deloitte with our clients and the organizations and individuals want actionable information delivered anytime, anywhere, and thrown through a number of platforms or devices, from smartphones to wearables to smart cars and IoT-enabled products on warehouse shelves. A dramatic acceleration is clearly underway. So with that in mind, if you think way back when the internet first came to be, there were many theories about how it would impact our lives, and most of them never really came true. As it relates to connectivity, how do you think our future is going to be different from the current state?
Yeah, it's going to be radically different, I think. I mean, if you look at the way things have progressed, back in the mid-'80s, we had less than, half a connected device per person in North America. We're at just over 2 today. We'll be, within the next 10 to 15 years, we'll be anywhere from sort of, 30 or 40 through to 100 plus, depending on whose forecast you buy into. That's just profoundly going to change the world.
I agree. I cannot imagine when my son is grown up, how the world is going to be. I think I won't be able to recognize the world at that point.
Yeah, I mean, for old guys like me, I'll just spend all my time trying to get these things to work.
Right.
Yes.
Well then, if I think about based on everything that we're seeing and everything that we're hearing here at CES, it seems our future is definitely going to be very much connected. Just about everything we're seeing, from devices to the clothes that I'm going to wear, to the car that I'm going to drive, to the entertainment I'm going to seek, it's all going to be connected and wirelessly in our homes, outside of our homes, your personal devices, as you mentioned. How do you think this is actually going to impact the carriers who really have the pipes to put all this together?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very significant for them, right? I mean, today they basically have business models that deal with people. And they deal with, a relatively small number of connections. I mean, we're in the hundreds of millions, and we're going to move to the billions. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just going to be a night and day shift for the carriers. They're going to have to build new models because, their models are built around quite a lot of interaction, both from the customer end and from their end, very high kind of cost, high touch kind of processes. That's all going to change.
Yeah, if we think about, again, CES, one of the big buzzwords we're hearing is 5G, 5G. Yeah. Everywhere we go on the floor, it's all about 5G. And that's clearly a big theme, not just in the last few years, but this year even more so, right? And to that point, how soon will it be a reality for us? And even before that, could one of you define 5G?
There's really 2 sets of innovations that are driving 5G, mm-hmm. right? One is obviously we're going to get a new radio air interface, right, which is coming. And in fact, even some of the equipment shipping today is 5G capable. At the same time, we're going to get a new way of architecting cellular, which is probably the more profound side of this. So 5G breaks a lot of the traditional linkages. So traditionally, your phone talks to a tower, it hands off, it talks to the next tower. With 5G, it can talk to multiple ones simultaneously. It can actually aggregate different types of wireless connectivity. So it can aggregate, Wi-Fi with cellular. It can aggregate multiple devices, multiple towers. very, very sophisticated. And then the other set of innovations are going to give every user a personalized dynamic experience. So what performance you get, when you get it, and where you get it will be very variable. And it'll be customized to what you're trying to achieve, which is quite different from the situation today where you kind of get what you get.
I mean, clearly from what you've just defined there, there's a significant impact for the carriers, right? From an infrastructure perspective, et cetera. Clearly a huge impact for you and I, and I, as a consumer. Where do you think the biggest benefit is going to come for the consumer over 5G?
So, I mean, obviously performance will increase, right? We'll get more speed, we'll get more coverage, right? We'll have more capacity, right? I mean, today we're at the point where, you know, that last link to the end user device is largely speaking wireless. About 80% of the traffic in the US is going wireless. About, you know, 80% of that 80% is essentially going over Wi-Fi networks, unlicensed spectrum. I think we'll see that change. And I think we'll see the tools and the security and the management capabilities of cellular being applied to all spectrum and all devices, right? Because as we move into this world, these devices, and this is, I think, the big thing about what's happening here is the communications and computing industry has largely been sort of very internally focused. They enable things between their own systems. We move data from machine to machine. I think what we're seeing now is this shift where the machines in the real world and the connectivity in the real world actually are going to interact. And so securing it through innovations like blockchain and stuff like this, managing it, and I think that's where a lot of the power of 5G is going to come in, and essentially helping the customers work through it is a big piece of it. I mean, what we're seeing is, like, I'll call it point solutions right now, right? So your watch talks to your phone, right? Your RFID tracker talks to a sensor. It's a very simple ecosystem. Imagine a world where the devices talk to each other and essentially collude. In my case, they collude against me, but you know, they therefore have this limited ability, I would say, to kind of see into the future a little ways, right? You actually start to remove surprise from the world, which is a scary kind of thought.
Yes.
Ice, any?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like going off the point of the 5G, right? But to the point of like colluding it with each other. How many connected devices do you guys have these days? I don't know. But the ones that I have, at least in my home or the other things, I'm so glad that they're connected to, at least to me, to a hub. But man, when that power goes down, the way of like trying to pull them up together and like operating them is just really tough. So one of the things that we're seeing at CES is like they're coming together, all these connected devices are coming together through voice-activated control centers, right? That's what I'm going to call them. And they're becoming really, really important pieces of our lives because, to your point, Phil, so many people have so many connected devices, and managing them is becoming an issue. Like their interoperability, that's a word, and I'm really having a hard time pronouncing it, is an issue. Or like their security is an issue because your regular customer doesn't know how to, like, you know, do the optimal things to secure them or
and they don't even know if they're secure or not, right?
Yes, that's the thing.
That's the scary thing. It's a big unknown out there.
Yeah.
Right? I'm old. I'm scared. Old and afraid. It's not a good way to be.
Well, right. And I mean, security used to be like, you know, somebody breaks into your home camera and, you know.
Yeah, it was physical. Security was physical.
Right.
And burglars were low tech.
Yeah, right. And now it's like I do have house cameras, and I always worry that, you know, I mean,
yeah,
you know,
that changes the cop's job, right? They used to just go around the neighborhood, round up the usual suspects and shake them down, right? It's hard when they're different continents.
Yeah, I have no idea. And so that actually makes me very nervous. And one of the things, actually, the themes at CES is everybody says, like, you know, things cannot shut up because voice activation is becoming a really good way of controlling all of these devices, which I'm really excited about, by the way.
And actually, to your point around voice activation, again, CES, we're seeing so much of it from everyone that's got some kind of voice-activated assistant or kind of, I'll call it a digital helper, right?
Right, that's a good word
right?
for it,
And so how do you see that in our new world of connectivity? Clearly that voice activation has to be connected to many things, right? And I touch upon security there as well, right? As all of those things. If something goes down, where does the consumer stand, right? There's a helper, but when does it become a hindrance?
Well, and the thing about the helpers, right? I mean, it's great. You wake everything up by saying, "Hey," right? I mean, I want the British version, where you would say, "Excuse me, my good man, but is it possible?" Right? But I don't think that one's coming for a while. It won't work anyway, because it'll be British. But you've got 6 of these things. They all wake up at the same time. Which one's going to answer you back? Do you have to start giving your different names? And that capability exists in these things that you can rename them. But then you've got to remember, what did I call that toilet? Right? I mean, it's going to be hard. Right. But I mean, clearly that's necessary. But I think about the product liability aspect of this, right? Back in the 80s, like if I bought a car and it had a bad audio system, right? You chewed up cassette tapes, right? I was out a couple of bucks, right? Now, people can take control of that car through the audio system. Right. That's actually how it was done in California there the other year, was through the audio system. So product liability's changed. Right. And I don't think this system is going to be perfect. So you can start to see what I'll call cyber insurance style products coming along, based on the assumption that ultimately something could go wrong. And therefore you need financial backup, right? And I think you'll see more and more of that. And I think that's where technology plays a really big role. And I think the carriers and others play a really big role in that they can reduce, if you like, the insurance risk and therefore, change that dynamic.
Got it. And then, so like you said, you talked about sort of risk and the impact on carriers, and clearly there's going to be something for the consumer there to be worried about, at least the fear of things going wrong, and particularly in that example of if you're in a car, right? And again, if I go back to what we're seeing on the floor, there's more and more autonomous vehicles that we're seeing, and the talk again of you're going to have so much more free time and you're going to be connected. So where does that stand with what 5G is going to enable for the autonomous vehicle? And what does that mean, one, for the enterprise, for those who are in the ecosystem for 5G and autonomous vehicles, and two, the consumers who are now going to have a hell of a lot more time while they're sitting in traffic?
Well, time is relative, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I mean, 5G, really will give you this more dynamic capability within, to communicate with a car or whatever, right? Latencies will be down, performance will be up. I mean, it's going to be a long time. I mean, you said it yourself, autonomous vehicles, right? And that's the key word, autonomous, right? It's going to be a long time for legislative and, socioeconomic reasons before we move to a world where every vehicle is interacting with each other and is autonomous. So we're going to have this phase where vehicles will be essentially standalone, avoiding things, a lot of active and passive systems on them like we have today. And then the communications layer will augment that performance, right? But it won't replace it. It'll be a mix of sensor platforms on the vehicle and communications to the vehicle until, we get the non-connected vehicles off the roads, and until we build out the infrastructure to deal with what I'll call the 5% cases, where autonomous vehicles will struggle.
Got it.
Right. So I think that's the big deal there. Now, what are you going to do in the car? Probably what you do when you're at home, right? The question I think you want to ask is, why are you in the car, right? About half the journeys in this country are people going to or from work, right? If you look at where we're going, from a socioeconomic point of view, right, through machine learning, artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, et cetera, we're actually taking a lot of traditional jobs away, right? I mean, economists debate this, whether this is sort of like a Luddite fallacy and we'll find new roles for these people or not. But the point is, I think that what we'll see is as machines move into the real world, we will see subsequent productivity, and it will be a displacement effect on labor. So people will actually have more free time. And I think governments are struggling with, well, what does it mean if you never have a job in your life? How do you live? How do you survive? How is your self-worth determined, right? These are big questions I think we're facing in the next 20 or 30 years. But we're talking technology here, not social policy.
Yeah, there you go.
Phil, you mentioned basically in the future having a lot more available and free time, particularly if my job goes away. Right. If my job goes,
and it should.
Exactly. What do I do? Right. So if my job goes away and I've got all this free time, I probably want to fill it with entertainment. If if I could ask you, where do you see the entertainment world in this new world of connectivity going forward?
So we already see the way people consume entertainment or content changing, right? The younger generations, they don't watch TV anymore. I mean, they consume the content, it's just not through TV. It used to be like that. In the past, if we wanted to watch a movie, we would go to the movie theater. Now, not so much, especially for younger generations. So it's going to continue to evolve. The way we used to distribute content, and the content itself were more connected in the past. Now they're going to get more and more disconnected. The medium is changing. So it's not it's the handhelds, it's the tablets and the smartphones that are taking over. So I think that's going to continue, and the content is going to be reshaped to fit that experience. That's my guess.
No doubt. I mean, just an example of that, what I saw on the show floor earlier today was they were showing 4K streaming through 5G, and that was incredible in terms of just the quality of the picture that was coming through, and a real 5G test coming through.
But that's an interesting debate, right? When you look at, like, these large screens and all of this, I mean, I have 3 teenage children, right? And they watch the TV sideways. They have this unique ability to watch television without looking at it. They look at a smartphone and the TV's to the side of their head. How they watch it is a mystery to me. I'm old. I sit and look at it. It's a tradition, right? But I mean, I think that's a new dynamic. And I think, to build on Ice's point, right? This, if they're interacting with a mobile device, which they do all the time, and there's another media device going on, tablet, TV, whatever it happens to be, entertainment isn't really designed to fill that medium. Right. But I think entertainment is changing. And so it will adapt to this multi-screen world. Will they remain multi-screen consumers? My gut tells me they probably will. But, this is an old guy predicting what young people do. But I think that's a really interesting dynamic. I mean, our own surveys say people multi-screen, at a very high rate, right? People interact with their, mobile phone at least 50 times a day, right? I mean, this is a very interesting dynamic. I mean, you just look at the role of that phone. I mean, it's people's, lifeblood almost, right?
Right. And to your point, the number of times people look at their phones, it's always been a debate, right? Is it an addiction? It's like, it became part of our lives. And it's not only for sole purposes of work or email or social media, but it's truly connectivity to life. So connected vehicles is going to come into that, right? Or already have come into that. The connected home. Connected self. I track my health through my phone. Again, like tax, and I have family living internationally, so that's very, very important for me to be able to communicate with them. So the phones are actually becoming hubs, or they have become hubs of our lives, and our connectivity is already changed with it. And also, I think we need to talk about their learning capabilities. On phones, people already, about 70% of them are using machine learning capabilities, and they just don't recognize it. When we say machine learning, everybody thinks about like this really glitzy world of machine learning, but it's as simple as predictive text or like email sorting, that sort of thing that we actually already use.
And I want to come back to machine learning because I think that's a huge topic on that front. But something you mentioned earlier about the hub. The smartphone, we all use it, and it pretty much is our connectivity to the world, as you've described. And something, Phil, you mentioned earlier about, well, which device am I going to talk to? Does the hub go away in the future with all this connectivity and all these chatty devices? Or is it going to be this helper that we talked about? What's going to be our new hub?
Well, I think that's an interesting dynamic because everyone's putting in the virtual assistant into all of their devices, but, then somebody speaks and the whole room reacts, right? So I think that will have to be resolved. And I think there is a need, people have a need, I think, for something that is theirs and their personality and they react to. And I think whilst the code for that can sit out in cyberspace, they need a physical interaction. I saw somebody had like a digital teddy bear go to sleep comforter on the show floor here, right? Something to hug digitally at night. And, I think the smartphone is a little bit become like that, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when, the average person with a phone, and it was like a couple of percent of the population, made 3 phone calls a day, right? Now, everything we do pretty much is going through that device.
Right.
And I think it's going to be very difficult to supplant it in consumers' minds. I mean, if you look at the price points of a lot of the phones that we buy, very expensive, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and we throw them away after 2 years. right? But we're very attached to them.
I'm just going to say 50% of the people actually wake up in the middle of the night and check their phone. It's not like, because
Is
it's
that
an alarm.
paranoia?
Well, I think it's the fear of missing out. And it's the real, phenomenon. But people check like social media at the middle of the night.
Right. So let me pivot a little. We talked a fair bit about the connectivity for media and the entertainment part of it. Probably another passion for many people, retail. What's the world going to look like when you're out there with all this connectivity, all this, close to zero latency? You're going to get instant information. More and more, we're seeing this whole AR world as well. Start putting a few of those things together. What does that mean for retail as well, for the consumer and for the retailer?
Yeah, I think retail is going to profoundly change, right? If you look at, we're driving the price points of connected devices down dramatically. So everything is going to be connected, right? So you can almost, if you imagine, talk to the inventory in a store, right? So that's just going to fundamentally change stores. Obviously, we've got, robotic delivery systems, drones are becoming a big thing, right? And that's what I mean about, the technology sort of getting out of its digital box and interacting with the real world. Now, it's sort of moving to this point where it can deal with the real world with real goods, whether this is inventory in the store, whether this is delivery of goods, and then with the capabilities of sort of, video and so on, you can virtually shop, right? And that's why I was saying, how much time will we spend in our cars? Right? Kind of scary thought. Does it make us more insular? I don't know. But, today, if you want a personal shopper, you got to spend a lot of money with Neiman Marcus, right? But you can do this technologically, and that makes it open to everybody. Right? The way we shop, what influences our tastes, right? All these things, I think, are set up to change.
And no doubt, if I think about what you've just said there, I could pretty much do all of that remote now as well, right? So will I need to ever walk into a store?
So how do you end up with that jumper?
the good lady.
Oh, Christmas present.
But obviously some, sizes, all of those things that matter. And there is that shopping experience that many people just love to do for many good reasons, right? They want to go into a store. They want to try something on. They want to see how it all matches. And again, that's the experience. So I get the transactional part we can do online, and I can be absolutely remote and it can be delivered to me in instantaneously or close to as possible. How does that experience get replicated?
Well, I think the nature of browsing is going to become much more personal, right? How often have you been frustrated when you've gone to a store for something and you don't have it, or you can't see it, or you can't find it, right? Those conditions are unlikely to exist going forward, right? Recommendation engines. So you go in looking for something, maybe it shows you other things that it thinks you might like. The recommendation engines don't work well for me because I think I'm a bit too random and eclectic. But they are getting better and better, right? So it can change the actual nature of browsing in a store, right? And I find store experiences are either binary. One is you floundering around by yourself trying to figure out what you want, or the other is you're getting harassed by somebody on a commission-based sale trying to move something. Right? And I think you can create a much better and much richer experience between the two through technology.
Well,
and still have the physical aspect of being in a store.
Well, that, I don't want to be, gender specific here, but from a women's perspective of shopping, I think there's always that enjoyment that I don't think is going to go away. And to your huggable digital teddy bear example back there's always going to be, in my opinion, the value of touch and feel of certain things and, the experience of it. I don't think that's going to go away. But I think the digital part of retail is here to stay for sure. About 90% of the people use their phones when they're shopping. I don't know if it's to browse other places for similar items or, browse the web for price comparisons or what I do is, I just look at the reviews if I'm going to buy something that is, especially something that I don't know a lot about, and refer back to those. That's super helpful. So the digital part of shopping and retail, I don't think is going to go anywhere. But what it's going to look like in 20, 30 years, that's a completely different scenario. I'm really curious to see what's going to be coming of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology on the show floor looking at how you collect retail information. So cameras and facial recognition to try and identify the types of customer and the mix of customer and what products they're interested in. With this technology down there that's looking at people's footwear,
Right.
Because it's less personal than looking at their face to try and make those decisions.
Right.
Interesting how you can determine gender and socioeconomic class and things from footwear, but obviously there are algorithms out there that attempt to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, but to take that example, like you said, of just the algorithms, the amount that it's capturing, clearly it's capturing a lot of data,
Yes.
right? Which means, again, if I think about that connected world, there's a lot of data that's being pushed back and forth to different devices, incredibly chatty devices. So if I was to pivot that with all of that data going around about ourselves, the security aspect has to be a huge concern for the carriers and for those who own that personalized data about us as individuals and consumers.
Well, I think one of the first questions that we should ask is who owns that data? Let's give an example, like the shoe example. If somebody captures a picture of my shoe, do I care? But if somebody captures millions of shoe images and then tied to data, I think it provides some sort of value to somebody, right? But who owns that data and who manages it? I don't know. I mean, Phil, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the policy framework hasn't really caught up with this issue of information, how it's held, how it's treated. I mean, we're seeing, customers having the right to delete data, to edit what they've got. Many of these artificial virtual assistants have technology where you can go back and edit them. But imagine, editing everything that you've put in and whenever you've said, hey, right?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Deloitte.
Right.
I'm waiting for the room to do something, but it clearly isn't going to. We're still working on ours. Yeah, come on, where are you at, Henish? Where's Hey Deloitte? But back to my point, because I lose my thoughts, it's senility kicking in, right? That can't be placed on the individual. There's got to be a legislative and policy framework. And then, from the company's side, this stuff's very personally identifiable. You know what I do, you know where I am, you know what concerns me, you know what I'm interested in, right? The security of this is going to be quite dramatic. Imagine the situation where, you have a young child, they grow up talking to one of the virtual assistants, putting their whole life through the virtual assistant, right? That machine knows more about them than they know about themselves. Right. So firstly, how do they switch? Right? If they decide they don't want to go with, vendor A and go with vendor B, how do they actually get off the one that's learned about them for 25 years? Where's the policy, legislative, inter-exchange protocols, etc., to allow that to happen? Right? Secondly, imagine if that vendor is hacked, right? You've got so much information on that person that it's kind of scary. You've got their whole life available to you. So the risk on this is quite dramatic. Right. And so I think there is a big need for a policy framework. And unfortunately, it's not really in the realm of national policy, right? Because this data is no longer, respecting national borders. Right. And that makes it very difficult for government and legal systems, which, work in states or countries and are very much, focused on the physical world, not the virtual world.
So that, like you say, that kind of restriction element and security of data, do you think it's more the onus is on the enterprise? And the reason I ask that question is clearly we're in a world where people love to share, right? Yeah. Across social, they're less and less worried about their personal information being out in the world, right? So do you think it's absolutely going to be that the consumer wants this, the consumer is driving the need, but it's going to be the enterprise, the businesses that are really taking their time to deliver this because of those risk aspects?
Yeah, and ICE knows this better than I do. We've done a lot of surveys, and people generally are not that concerned about privacy and are happy to give up privacy if they think they get something in return for it. However, people are very concerned about security. And actually, our surveys would suggest this is becoming an increasing concern as people understand more about the virtual world. Right. So security is important, privacy is not. Right. And I think that's a big deal. You talked earlier about autonomous vehicles. That's another sort of policy framework. Are autonomous vehicles better than most drivers? Absolutely. Are people going to have, accidents and potential deaths in autonomous vehicles? Probably. But it's still better, one would argue, than the current situation. Right? But the policy framework is sort of putting such a high bar, it feels like, on some of these things that you can't afford a little bit of leakage.
Yeah. We were just talking about this in a panel yesterday. Just from a privacy perspective, it almost feels like at this point in time, people don't have that much of a choice either. Or to Phil's point, they don't really care as long as they get something back in return. Over 90% of the people just accept terms and conditions without reading them. And I'm one of them, right? I mean, how many times have you read those really detailed things before you upgrade? And
I give up about page 87 of the terms and
Yeah,
conditions.
I know. Like my cutoff is around like 46th page, but it's just not possible, right? But at the same time, the consumers don't seem to be that concerned about it at this point in time. Well, what's going to happen in the next few years, similar to the curve of security, right? They were not worried about it that much earlier, but now it's becoming more of a reality. The connected world is becoming more of a reality. They're realizing the issues that go with it. The connected home, somebody can't hack into your home. The connected car, somebody can't hack into your car. All of those things go. So from a privacy perspective, I don't know how it's going to be like.
Yeah, and I think that's the importance of brand to companies, right? That consumers trust brands, right? And I think that's a huge piece of corporate brand building down the road, is to have that trust, and then your policies to maintain it, because it's very easy to lose that trust, will become critical.
Right.
So I'd like to, something that you touched upon earlier with machine learning, and Phil, I love that delineation between privacy and security. So now I want to go to that machine learning world, and AI, machine learning, they've been strutting their stuff at CES for a number of years, but it's really big this year. So where does that factor in, particularly as you mentioned earlier around that security, privacy aspect and machine learning? How does that all factor into this new connected world that we're living in?
We see that based on we did this annual survey and we asked our consumers about the upcoming trends in the mobile world. And one of the things that we asked this year was about machine learning and AI. And most of the consumers don't realize that they use actually machine learning and AI in their mobile phones now, but they do actually. And the most common used one was predictive texting, and I don't think they think it as machine learning, but it is. And there is so much data out there and feeding into these algorithms. It's so normal that machine learning is going to be very prominent and very important in our lives in the coming years.
Yeah, if you connect everything in my home, for example, right? If every device is connected, if I am the critical interface between all these devices, so I'm the interface between the thermostat and the blinds or whatever it happens to be, that puts a lot of work on me. These things are going to talk to each other, and they're going to do things on my behalf. So they're going to collectively, almost as a system, decide, that like it's morning, the alarm should ring, the blind should go up, the thermostat should be set on X, and the coffee should start brewing. Right? They're going to do that by themselves. And that, I think, is how we'll see a lot of this machine learning coming on, is as we start to create systems of multiple, devices, right? At the moment, most of these devices work in a standalone mode, or there are little kind of closed ecosystems of a select subset of devices. I think that's the big breakthrough in machine learning. The same, obviously, is true, in a commercial and industrial setting. And I think, just like when we brought electricity into factories, there'll be a long learning curve as we re-engineer our commercial world to deal with these capabilities.
It very much feels that the future is now, right? That even we don't recognize some of these things.
The future is always the future.
Well, let me put it another way, that things that I imagine will be taking place in the future, I'm walking the floor and I'm seeing it today.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So let me fast forward us all a few years from now. Where do you really see the connected world being, and what's it going to mean for the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see this massive proliferation of devices. I think you'll see this sort of complicated period where we have little islands of stuff that work together, but they don't play nice with each other. And so we'll see a lot of confusion, a lot of failed experiments, a lot of blind technological paths. But I think we'll come out of the other end of it where the real world and, if you like, the technology world are intimately intertwined, right? That things are secure, they communicate with each other, a lot of stuff is done on my behalf, right? And that really changes what I do, right? My daily life will change. I don't need to do a lot of, I'll call it sort of menial tasks, right? A lot of, the job roles that we have out there are going to disappear. Right. I mean, I think the U.S. government predicts, 40 to 50% of the jobs will be made technologically obsolescent in the next 20 years. Right. So it'll give people more leisure time. It'll give them, a different sort of lifestyle to the one they have today. Profound implications, of course, for like the world of real estate. Right, there's a big retrofit cost in some of this technology. Very rapid life cycles, so devices are going to have to work on technological life cycles. Right, hopefully we'll move to a world where software upgrade allows devices to sustain. But that is a big question in my mind. Is sort of like devices being thrown away because they're technically obsolete. Right, do I replace my washing machine every 3 years because I need a better AI system in it?
I think that the word of stability is going to come into our words, meaning that take our mobile phone usage, right? The smartphones efficiently have been in our lives almost a decade now, right, with the iPhone introduction. And now we've been through this whole journey of overusing them, or maybe that's not a good word, of using them a lot. And now we're stabilizing our usage. So I kind of think of connected items in the same manner too. We're almost trying to find good user cases where they're going to be meaningful in our lives. And we have seen so many products came into market, and we tried, and consumers eventually made the decision that the amount of time you invest in trying to use them is not worth the time that they save in their lives, and then they don't stick around. And there are some others that actually do, which is great. So there's going to be that stabilization, in my opinion, of what's going to end up in our lives in the future. And then, of course, the whole angle of machine learning, data, and security, that's going to continue to be very important for us.
If I move forward in those few years in terms of the era of connectivity, a lot more connectivity,
right,
things to get more and more stable,
yes,
as it really sort of proves out what is going to be the hub, what is the way that we're going to use it.
Yeah, and also just like our little islands of technology, like within the household, you'll have my personal island of technology, you'll have other family members' islands of technology, much of which can be common, right? And then you've got, friends and so on, and how does their technology interact with your technology? So all of these boundaries, I think, are very interesting areas that we really are just starting to think about.
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure, right?
It's very exciting for sure. Very exciting.
Fantastic. So, all right, that's it for day 2 of our CES podcast series. So thank you, Phil. Thank you, Ice, for joining me to discuss the next era of connectivity.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow is the last day of our user-friendly special at CES, and Hanish will be back with more surprise guests and hot topics from the show. See you then.